for those of you who maybe are joining us who have had others participate versus others who have accessed some of these materials after the fact, would anybody be able to speak to that or drop something in the chat that says you've been able to do that or you've used the materials that have been sent back out to the directors, whether it's preschool or special ed? I'd be curious to know. There's been a couple folks who have emailed us and have had some difficulty with trying to access some of the shared resources. So we found alternate ways to share that information back out. So I was just curious. But we are recording now for this session for future viewing. But today's topics, we're going to be talking about the instructional cycle. We're going to spend some time talking about culturally responsive practices and thinking about our classrooms. We'll spend some time talking about universal design for learning. And when it comes to scaffolding, these are parts that we may revisit when we come back together, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about what what the next session will look like. So that's kind of our big talking points for today. And let's see here. Go to the next slide. When we were together from day 2, for those of you who maybe weren't with us, I'll do just a kind of a quick rundown. We talked a lot about documentation, just different ways that you're engaged with documenting. Certainly depending on your role, this is going to look really different. But we spent some time thinking about, what are those big things globally that we would want to document. So we spent some time discussing, making sure that things are dated and time stamping, and really just as we're documenting things, making sure that we're sticking to the facts, leaving out feelings and opinions. But then we also spent some time talking about different ways that we are tracking data and thinking specifically about our IEP goals, or perhaps how we are providing some data through our functional behavior assessments, and really thinking about the direction that our teachers are providing us when we're doing the data tracking, regardless of what that looks like in our individual roles. And Tiffany spent some time talking about de-escalation techniques. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we talked about from our last session. And kind of to get our brains thinking about instruction and how we engage in that process, I'm going to have you respond to some questions for me. And I'm going to drop this link in the chat. And you can see it there on the slide. We also have this in a handout that I will pull up for you in case you need it that way. Bear with me here. I just lost my... All right, can you see the screen? It should say Paraprofessional Skills Inventory. And I'm going to drop the direct link for those of you who are able to access it into the chat. So there's the direct link. And if you want to go ahead and open that up, and I'm going to pull up our materials in the in our shared folder. I'm going to do just a quick share here for just a minute. Hopefully you can see the Paraprofessional Skills Competence Inventory. And can somebody give me a thumbs up that they can see the inventory sheet that I'm referring to? Or unmute. I think we have a small enough group this time. The Paraprofessional Skills Competence Inventory has actually a bunch of sections to it. We're just going to look at this delivery of instruction. And it's really just kind of a self-assessment, if you will, of just kind of how we feel in terms of, are these skills that we feel unprepared for? Are they skills that, you know what, we feel pretty good about offering this type of support through our delivery of instruction. And so instead of responding to each one of these, we just picked 10 just to give us a basic understanding of kind of how you're feeling. And if you can't access the link, no problem. What we'll do is you can just kind of jot down on a piece of paper and perhaps after the fact respond to the survey/poll. But what we were wanting to do is to really get an understanding of, and especially as we move forward, what might be some of these areas that we could provide some additional support around. So as you see those numbers 1 through 4, 1 will be unprepared, and then 4 will be highly skilled. So what we want you to do is to have an opportunity to respond to the 10 items. And I'll just go through those quickly on, I'm going to go back to our screen. I'm going to do a new share. Hopefully we're back. Are you seeing my original screen that actually has our questions on there? These are the ones that I would really like you to respond to, whether it's using the link or just on a piece of paper. Observing and recording student progress in academic areas. Are you feeling unprepared or highly skilled? And so you have a range of numbers. Reading or repeating tests or directions to students. Do you feel not prepared or very highly skilled? Helping students with workbooks or other written assignments. The next one would be assisting students to compose original work. Facilitating students' active participation in cooperative groups. Helping students use computers. Translating instruction or student responses, monitoring student performance as directed, reteaching or reinforcing instructional concepts, and then the last one, just modifying materials according to directions. So if you will, could you take just a couple minutes to respond to those? And we're going to see if the poll feature will give us some immediate results. And Tiffany, it looks like we have some others who are ready to join us. So I'm going to admit participants from Caldwell, Belair, Caldwell and Belair.
Okay. Is one of them, we have an Amanda that's going to be joining us.
It just says the school. It doesn't give me specific names. So sorry.
Morgan just brought in someone that'll be joining us.
Okay. Thanks, Janet. Yeah, this was really just to kind of get our wheels turning about instruction and to maybe give us a little more feedback moving forward, how we could better support.
Are we muted?
I'll start with you.
I can hear you.
Yeah, so Bel Air and Caldwell, if you can put who's in your group, first, last names in the chat, that would be helpful for attendance.
All right, I'm going to give you just a couple minutes. And for those of you who are just joining us, what we are doing is responding to a survey. And this is the survey link, and I'm going to try to pull it if you're interested, or if you're able to. I will copy it again and throw it back in the chat.
Caldwell, thank you for providing your names. Bel Air, when you get a chance, if you can put your names in the chat, I would greatly appreciate it.
All right. So I'm going to do another new share. So here our results are trickling in. Trying a new piece of technology out. So for observing and recording student progress in academic areas, we had quite a few respond as that number 2, with 1 being unprepared, with 4 being highly skilled. So it's nice to see that we've got a nice range of people who feel like that's a skill they have under their belt versus maybe that's not quite the area. Thinking about reading or repeating tests or directions to students, that probably feels pretty self-explanatory, right? That's something that doesn't really take a lot of support, but if it's something that we don't do a lot of, perhaps not so much. And then helping students with workbooks or other written assignments, again, kind of seeing a mix. And assisting students to compose their original work. You can see the blue bar there of how many responded to and how many responded a level 3. And then facilitating students' active participation in cooperative groups. You can see the responses there. Use of computers. I don't know, sometimes I'm technically challenged, right? So I think sometimes our students probably could teach me a thing or two. So those were the responses there. Translate instruction or student responses, sign language or other, using sign, or maybe they're an English learner. So I stuck this one in there in particular because I do know that we have pockets of our region where we have EL populations, and that's a population that continues to grow. Monitoring students' performance, and then reteaching or reinforcing instruction that's introduced by the teacher. And then lastly, modifying materials. And again, that would be as directed by the teacher. So thank you for playing along. Again, I thought this would just be a good way for us to kind of get our brains thinking about how we're supporting instruction for some of our students, and then giving us some feedback moving forward. So, all right. And then for those of you who maybe can't access this directly right this minute, I would love for you to find an opportunity to give us more feedback in our planning. So that would be extremely helpful. But thinking about instruction, they do provide us with kind of this overview of the instructional cycle. You do have a handout in the shared folder that I will pull up here in just a moment. We were going to do some breakout rooms, kind of thinking about this instructional cycle, but perhaps considering our group size, maybe we will rethink that. But they outline these 5 cycles, or these 5 aspects of the cycle: planning, teaching, evaluating, reflecting, and then planning again. So what we did is we took one of the components of the paraprofessional training that OPEP has created, and really used that information and plopped it kind of as a handout, all of the information from those cycles, or from that cycle. So I'm going to share that with you, and hopefully you can access that or have been able to pull that from our shared resources already. But this is the instructional cycle that they have outlined by what teachers do, and then how paraprofessionals are helping to support. So what I wanted to do is to give you an opportunity to kind of review each aspect of the instructional cycle, and really think about what are the areas that you find yourself doing more of, and then perhaps the area that you find yourself doing less of. So from the participants, Tiffany, do we have enough to get into a breakout room, do you think? I know that was some really good feedback that we got from our first session, is that you enjoyed getting out into those breakout rooms, and I'm happy to do that. So we have an opportunity to talk to each other a little bit.
We're sitting at 26 participants right now, so I think we could probably do breakouts.
All right. So let's see here. In the meantime, if you can access that form, and I can still leave it on the screen. Tiffany, can you verify for me? Can you still see the instructional cycle on the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. And so I'm going to try. How many groups do we have sitting together? Does it look like?
Looks like we have Bel Air, Caldwell.
Let's try 5 breakout rooms.
But I was thinking, let's do 5.
All right, perfect. So 5 minutes, just review the instructional cycle. Again, where do you find yourself supporting the most, versus what aspect of the cycle do you find yourself supporting the least? And just have a conversation with your colleagues. All right, here we go.
Right there.
This meeting is being recorded.
Mute. Just unmute us. Did you do it?
Yeah, but you can't even see. You can see as part of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, I think everybody's back. So I'm curious if someone, in terms of thinking about planning, did anybody indicate, thinking about our small group discussions, how many of you do a lot of planning when we think about the instructional cycle? Like, this is part that you really sit in and support this part of the instructional cycle. You and the teacher are you're helping to do the planning aspect. Anybody want to unmute, talk about their discussions, or throw it in the chat?
Joe Winkler, OVESC, Switzerland of Ohio.
Yeah.
This is something that I do every week with the teachers that I assist. We talk about what we're doing for the week, and they'll have me, they'll ask what I think of okay, so should we do this? We plan together.
Nice. Awesome. Do you have do you have like forms and stuff that she gives you to do that planning with, or you guys just have-
No, it's verbal. We just,
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. I appreciate that. Is there anybody who doesn't really, they're not involved with the planning aspect? I'm watching the chat here.
Hi, Amanda from Bel Air Elementary School.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi. We do not deal with planning. That comes all from our teacher.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for sharing. And I'm noticing in the chat that somebody wasn't able to pull up the document. Sorry about that. I was trying to scroll through it as people were in their breakout rooms, but forgetting that you're probably not getting to see the actual form itself. So my apologies. How about teaching? Does anybody want to share in terms of their small group discussion? Is that, I'm assuming, part of what you're supporting, or maybe not so much? I can make this bigger for those of you maybe who couldn't see it previously. Or anybody want to share kind of their discussion and anything that they heard that resonated in terms of how others are participating with this part?
Our group just kind of came to the consensus that this is something that all of these are things that we do on a daily basis.
Okay.
It's just something that's part of my job as
So-
support for my teachers.
So for your group, this is what you're heavily mostly involved with, just this teaching.
All of these, every
Oh,
part.
awesome.
I'm
Gotcha.
involved in, for myself, I'm involved in every part.
Okay.
I'm lucky I work with teachers that consider me just as much a teacher as themselves.
That's awesome. Thank you.
And they say that to the students as well. So
Nice. Anybody else? How about let's move to evaluating. Is there anybody who this is something that you do a lot of or not so much?
In our building, we have, oh, wait. No, where's, oh my God, wait.
That was the one that's
There we go. We had her microphone on and mine off, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so our setup is a little different. We have 3 full-time aides in the classroom. And so I know for the most part that they do a lot of this because they're tracking some interventions and things like that. And they have that conversation with the classroom teachers, whereas we have 5 other aides in our extended care. And so they're pretty much, running things in there, but they try to model what's happening in the classroom. But for next year, the setup is going to be a little different because I want them to also be involved in the classroom. Because, we're all a valuable part of this early learning and getting a good start. So, that's one of the plans that's why I was asking about nap time, because what I would like to have is next year with depending on the ratio and things like that, if you have like an overwhelming amount of adults working in the afternoon, but yet we don't need all of them, then they could then on say Monday, Wednesday, Friday is their day to go do intervention in some of the classrooms and things like that. So I'm wanting them to get more involved within the classroom and not just be so extended care bound, so that's my hopes and dreams and aspirations for next year, but having them be more involved in what's going on.
Maximizing your best resources, right? Perfect. Thank you, Jeanette. Anybody else with evaluating? How about reflecting? Sounds like some of you, just based on some input we've heard already, this is something that you're doing. Anybody hear anything that resonated or that you want to make mention of from your small group discussion? All right.
You don't really have a say in anything that the students, it's whatever the teacher says.
Yep. Not involved in
I mean, you can suggest, stuff, but overall it's just the teacher.
Yep.
Okay. So really thinking about the direction from the teacher is how you're involved or when and how you're involved. So thank you. Yeah, and another point just to reflect, it does look so different across our districts, as we said, kind of, I guess, from day one, and even within district, just it looks very different, and even within classrooms. So thanks, everybody. All right, so we'll go back to the PowerPoint, and again. We're kind of laying the foundation in terms of, thinking about how you're supporting students in instruction with cultural awareness kind of being a piece when we think about our instructional practices. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. So thinking about this quote, cultural awareness or cultural competence is understanding your own culture, others' culture, and the role of culture just in education, taking a student's culture into account as a basis for learning, communicating high expectations, and reshaping curriculum to reflect students' diversity helps us to lead to better educational outcomes. And that came from the National Education Association. But one of the things that I kind of wanted us to think about is if you have somewhere close just to jot some ideas or thoughts down, do me a favor and list experiences, beliefs, or things that help to define you. And I'm going to give you some examples. So like, I'm a single mom. I have one daughter. I have a sibling or a brother. I was born and raised Methodist. I'm white. I've been working since I'm 16. Since I've been 16, have a master's degree, and I've lived in 3 different states. So just to give you an example, I want you to just list all of your experiences and beliefs that really help to define you. So I'm going to give you just a couple minutes to jot some ideas or some thoughts down. All right, so as we do this, or when we think about these, it really helps us to understand what influences our own culture has on our actions or even our belief systems. And so when we're able to really think about that, we can think about or recognize the influence of others' cultures on their own lives or actions or beliefs. So I think it's just one of those things that's kind of important to remember. And I think when we start thinking about our classrooms, just how much those things could be impacting. So I'm curious whether or not you drop it in the chat, or if you want to unmute. Anybody want to describe some of those things, or I guess share some of those things that you put on your list in terms of your experiences or beliefs? As you're thinking about that, as you're putting things in the chat, or thinking about what you'd like to share. I know just being a single mom, that has certainly influenced the way I kind of think about things, and perhaps engage or interact with others, always being mindful of that experience, and all of the difficulties that I think came along with that. So I think I am pretty aware of what I bring sometimes to certain situations. So anybody else? All right. So I think I'm going to go to the next slide, but please, I'm going to watch the chat. If somebody wants to add some things in there, kind of respond. Thinking about our classrooms, culturally inviting classrooms. These are kind of those big
sensitivity.
big ideas, thinking about what do our classrooms look like, and how do they feel? So we're always being mindful of high expectations, and do we presume competence, especially with our students who have a lot of challenges, right? We don't ever want to assume that that they can't do something. We also think about really building positive relationships with our students, as well as our families and our communities. And as we think about really building those positive relationships with our students, are we respecting their individuality? And do we take time to learn about their interests? Are we using positive communication with them? And that would be both verbal and nonverbal. I know one of the things I'm not real thrilled about with the Zoom and technology is sometimes I'm sure my face is showing something very different than how I'm feeling, right? So sometimes those nonverbals are just as important. Treating students the way you would want to treat or have your own child treated, using humor and just really having fun. Encouraging children to actually help each other, and reinforcing the use of appropriate social skills. That's kind of all part of that building positive relationships. We also think about cultural sensitivity, and oftentimes I'll hear things like, well, in terms of our student population, we're a mostly white Caucasian district, but we know that there are other cultural aspects that play into our districts. So I think sometimes that word gets a little, I don't think it's widely understood. So active teaching methods, that's another aspect when we think about our classrooms. How do we engage students in their learning when we think about, promoting their own individual thinking, and having discussions and doing investigations and creating, projects, and, just all those opportunities to really have them collaborate with each other. We think about teacher as facilitator, guiding discussions and supporting students through an actual learning process and asking questions, as opposed to kind of that, just teacher directed or that kill and drill lecture mode. We also think about our students controlling the portion of lessons. And we know this can look very different considering the needs of our students, right? So we have to be real thoughtful about how that might look, but can we provide lots of choice for our students in terms of what they're doing or how they're learning. And then also thinking about instruction around groups and pairs and, how do we vary just different learning opportunities within our classrooms. So any thoughts or reactions to this slide? Any good things that you guys are doing or seeing within your own programs?
Full of different culture.
Yep.
We treat them all the same.
Right. So we're trying to be real sensitive and everybody belongs here and nobody's treated differently. Thank you.
You were talking about groups and pairs. We do a lot of small group at River. We call it our small group intervention time. And like in our kindergarten, and each intervention period is about a half an hour long. Our kindergarten, we have, I think it's 12 adults that, because we pull from on the K through 2 floor, we pull from all the aides and intervention specialists and everything at that time. And it's all small groups. So like my kindergarten group, I have 3 kids in my kindergarten group. So they get a lot of individualized attention there. And we work on, we're doing Haggerty science of reading things are all what we're working on during that time. So, and then I have a first grade group that has, I think I have 4 kids. Yeah, I have 4 kids in my first grade group. My second grade group, I have 6. As we progress through the grade levels, the groups become a little bit larger because we have fewer adults, of course, as we go through. But that we have seen so much growth in our kids just since we started doing these groups last year. We started with our small group last year, that intervention time in the younger grades, and just so much growth in their abilities. And it's just amazing to watch that progression. And we switch up groups because we test every 4 to 6 weeks. And then we see, okay, well, this one has mastered the skill that this person's working on. So now we're going to move them and they're going to work with this person on something else while we move other kids into this group. And it's a really neat system we've got going there. So
that sounds awesome. Thanks, Joe. Anybody else? I did see a couple things in the chat that I hadn't responded to, and Laura talked about some of the traits, and even from her experiences that we talked about on the previous slide, thinking about how our experience impacts, and she talked about, or she said that she had been married for 35 years, 2 daughters, 4 grandchildren, 6 siblings, comes from a very large family, and previously worked in a mental health field. So yeah, Laura, thank you for sharing that. And even thinking about you being married for 35 years and myself not being married that long, just the differences that, I guess, in terms of our experiences and beliefs, how different or what we bring to the table. So I appreciate you sharing that. But we can see how those things influence, they just have an influence in terms of how we interact and engage and thinking about our students in our classrooms. So thank you. All right. And then I'm going to finish with this next slide. Assets-based pedagogy. And this was one of the slides that we're borrowing, or an idea, which is actually a teaching method that was referenced as part of the OPEP presentation materials that I just felt was very suiting for our conversations, and thinking about, how we view our students in terms of just the different characteristics that they have, their different background experiences, and, you know, thinking about their positive assets that really, if we could leverage those things, just how much more helpful that would be to help with their learning or to assist with their learning. So it's, when you think about, you know, assets versus deficits, we can, you know, really see the difference in terms of, you know, really having high expectations for students and focusing on their strengths, and reframing some of those characteristics that maybe we don't always mean to, but sometimes they come out maybe not as positive or as a strength. So this slide just kind of shows that the difference or the contrast between deficit versus asset-based views of our students, which I really liked. You know, so as educators, as paraprofessionals, you know, really wanting to be mindful of replacing, you know, our deficit approach with more of that asset approach. And just the small amount of time that Tiffany and I have been able to interact with all of you and have conversations, it definitely seems like you guys do a wonderful job of focusing on those strengths.
I even do this with my granddaughter. She's 3.5 now, but when she was 2, her mommy called her bossy. And I said, she's not bossy, she's assertive, and she's not whiny, she's persistent. And I taught her to say, I'm assertive. And she still does that. If someone says you're being bossy, she says, no, I'm assertive.
Well, that's awesome. I love it. Anybody else have some good examples? Yeah, similar, Joe. I think it was Brene Brown. I followed her for a chunk of time, and she talked about a teacher of her daughters who talked about or called her messy. And so it was kind of very similar where, no, I'm not messy. And I forget even the words that they used to describe her in more of a positive light. So whether or not she was hardworking or I forget what the words were, but yeah, always something to be mindful of. All right. So I think I'm going to stop sharing and I am going to pass the baton to Tiffany. And Tiffany, I'm going to, oops, not do that. I'm going to make you the host. And you should be golden.
All right, thank you. So like Holly said, we're kind of changing up a few things and cutting this session a little shorter. So on your PowerPoint, it has a whole section on scaffolding. So the next session, we'll hit this pretty hard because this is stuff that you do every day when working with kiddos. And then I'd also would like to throw in some differentiation into there and kind of have some conversations around that. So that's kind of what we'll shift to for our last session. So I appreciate everybody being very flexible today. So the next part that we're going to kind of move into is universal design for learning. And, you know, I'm sure in your buildings, you've heard this from teachers, from principals. So really the approach I'm taking on universal design for learning is really from your role, things that I thought as a paraprofessional, you may be a part of, or things that you have to put together for the classroom that your teacher is asking you to do, and hitting all types of learners. And basically, universal design for learning is just a fancy word to say it is access for all. So when we think of a whole classroom, we're not thinking of a subgroup. We are thinking of all the students and all their learning needs, and creating an environment for them that is access for all. And so that's kind of UDL in a nutshell. So that's the very condensed version. So the slides that I'm going to be showing you, it's a lot of words on a slide, but I'm going to be asking you for feedback, right? You can unmute if you don't want to type in the chat, but let's just have some open dialogue to help Holly and I kind of understand what you are doing in your classrooms that kind of pertain to these slides that we're going to be going through. But of course, I love videos. And so I am going to share my screen. Holly, if you can just make sure that you can see it. I love videos, and a lot of this information can be found on the CAST website. And I think we refer that in our resources. So it is a wonderful resource for anyone really to go in and just kind of take a look. But this little video they put together, and I just thought it was cute. And yeah, so here we go.
This teacher needs to meet a curriculum goal, and she's got a very diverse group of students. And so does this teacher. And this one. Most do. In fact, research shows that the way people learn is as unique as their fingerprints. What does this mean for teachers of today? Classrooms are highly diverse, and curriculum needs to be designed from the start to meet this diversity. Universal design for learning is an approach to curriculum that minimizes barriers and maximizes learning for all students. Whoa, that's a fancy term. Universal design for learning. Let's unpack it a bit. Let's think about the word universal. By universal, we mean curriculum that can be used and understood by everyone. Each learner in a classroom brings her own background, strengths, needs, and interests. Curriculum should provide genuine learning opportunities for each and every student. Now let's think about the word learning. Learning is not one thing. Neuroscience tells us that our brains have three broad networks: one for recognition, the what of learning, one for skills and strategies, the how of learning, and one for caring and prioritizing, the why of learning. Students need to gain knowledge, skills, and enthusiasm for learning, and a curriculum needs to help them do all three. But every learner is unique, and one size does not fit all. So how do we make a curriculum that challenges and engages diverse learners? This is where the word design comes in. A universally designed building is planned to be flexible and to accommodate all kinds of users, with and without disabilities. It turns out that if you design for those in the margins, your building works better for everyone. Curb cuts and ramps are used by people in wheelchairs, people with strollers, and people on bikes. Captioning on TV serves people who are deaf, people learning English, people in gyms, and spouses who get to sleep at different times. UDL takes this idea and applies it to the design of flexible curriculum. UDL goes beyond access because we need to build in support and challenge. So how do we use the UDL framework to make learning goals, methods, materials, and assessments that work for everyone? First, ask yourself, what is my goal? What do I want my students to know, do, and care about? Then ask, what barriers in the classroom might interfere with my diverse students reaching these goals? To eliminate the barriers, use the 3 UDL principles to create flexible paths to learning so that each student can progress. Number 1, provide multiple means of representation. Present content and information in multiple media and provide varied supports. Use graphics and animation, highlight the critical features, activate background knowledge, and support vocabulary so that students can acquire the knowledge being taught. Number 2, provide multiple means of action and expression. Give students plenty of options for expressing what they know and provide models, feedback, and supports for their different levels of proficiency. Number 3, provide multiple means of engagement. What fires up one student won't fire up another. Give students choices to fuel their interests and autonomy. Help them risk mistakes and learn from them. If they love learning, they will persist through challenges. And remember, always keep in mind the learning goal. Get rid of barriers caused by the curriculum and keep the challenge where it belongs. And that's it. Okay, quick recap. Show the information in different ways. Allow your students to approach learning tasks and demonstrate what they know in different ways, and offer options that engage students and keep their interest. Universal design for learning equals learning opportunities for all. For more information on UDL, go to www.cast.org.
Okay. Get back to, sorry about that. So that, like I said, that's just kind of UDL in a nutshell. So the next slides were just, this is where I would like to have some open dialogue. If you are comfortable unmuting as we kind of talk about some of these things. So in that little video clip, they talked about, you know, the actual access to the curriculum, removing barriers. But the one thing that I really want to hone in on is creating a safe place for students, a place that is welcoming, accepting, and supportive, right? And we can look back, and we've been in all different types of classrooms, and you always know when you enter a classroom where this is taking place, right? Because you get that warm, fuzzy feeling when you walk in. Every kid is accepted. There's very good routines in place, and schedules are very visual in the room. There's charts, there's timers. And so that does create this wonderful, safe place for students. So some of the things that you may be asked to do on a pretty regular basis is to create those charts and calendars and visual timers and cueing students back on the task, or you are a big part of that classroom routine as a paraprofessional. And the teacher really relies on their paraprofessionals to help maintain those class routines for all the students. And having that other set of eyes in the classroom is great to ensure that this takes place. The other piece of creating that safe space is also giving students fair warning of changes, right? Because we know a lot of kids do not like changes, some more than others. Some can just roll with changes, but to create that safe place for a student, letting them know what's coming up next, if there's a change, is really important. Also, we need to vary the sensory stimulation. So whether the students have autism or not, have autism, it really isn't even that piece. It's just sensory stimulation. So a variety of presence, being aware of the background noise and visual stimulations. Do we need to provide students with those noise buffering headphones? Again, being aware of the space. Also, we need to give a vision of pace of work, how long that work is taking, what does a work session look like for the students, and what students need a break. Maybe it's, let's just say, for instance, it's at the high school and it's a block schedule. That is really, block schedules are hard, right? Until they get used to it. It's a big, huge span of time. And so kids need breaks. Maybe they need a timeout. So again, being aware of the physical space of the room and the safety of the classroom. So what are some things that you guys do on a daily basis that provide that safe classroom environment for your students? And I know there's going to be a lot of responses to this, so I can't wait to hear the share out. You can just unmute. So what do you do to provide a safe space? And Holly, I do not see the chats. Not sure what I'm doing wrong here. The whole technology challenge, but if there's any comments in the chat, do you mind sharing those out?
Sure will.
Krista from Bel Air.
Hello.
Hi. Our kids in our room, they love the timer. We have a timer that looks like a clock, and when you move the minutes, it turns red. So if you set a timer for 10 minutes, they can look and see how much time they have left. And they like that. And even during playtime, we'll set a timer for cleanup, and they will all work together, as fast and as hard as they can to get stuff cleaned up before the timer goes off. So that's
Yep.
really a good thing that we use in our room.
That's great. Thank you for that. Anyone else?
This isn't
We
necessarily.
have,
Oh,
go ahead.
This isn't necessarily in the classroom, but I have breakfast duty every morning, and I work in K2, but I'm based in second grade. And so the first thing I do every morning is I'm up and down their table. Hey, good morning. It's good to see you. What'd you do last night? If I know that they were planning to do something special, like, hey, how did that go? If a kid's been absent, how you feeling? Are you feeling better? What's going on with you? And I was actually just out last week, the first 3 days of the week, because my daughter had a baby, and they were so excited when I came back. Can we see pictures, Miss Joe? Did she have the baby? Let's see the pictures. And so it's so important to foster a relationship with your students, because I know which kids, maybe their home life is not the best. And they can't function at school if they had a rough morning getting ready to come to school.
absolutely.
If things were hard before they walked out the door, or if things were hard before they went to bed last night, they can't function at school, and we can't expect them to function at school if they don't feel safe and loved. And that is our top priority. It is to make sure our kids feel safe and loved.
And really, learning cannot take place, right, until
No.
those basic human needs are met. That's why I would always encourage, when I was in district, I would encourage teachers to do an emotion chart right at the beginning of the day. You know how sometimes some class routines, they come in and they have to move their clip over. They're here, and I'm a packer, I'm not a packer. And I would encourage the teachers to also put in a feelings chart or a feelings. And so, they had happy, sad, and they would just have a variety of things. And that would give a teacher and the para a quick eyeball of, what's the temperature of my class today? Is there any students that need a little extra attention based on that feelings chart? So again, just another way to create a safe space. But I love that share back, Joe. Thank you.
We do have a couple responses in the chat. Tiffany, Laura says we have the day's schedule on the board every day. The students know we are having art or PE or library, for examples, on that particular day. And then Hopewell said we have a sensory room. We have a sensory room for breaks, and we also have flexible schedules, so we can go to extra recesses. We can also have one-on-one times with students as needed. And we have visual feelings, scheduled charts, and safe places in each of our rooms. And Valerie said, my student has checklists in both labs that he does, and he gets breaks every so often or as he needs. And we also use first then stories if he needs more.
Perfect. Yes. Wonderful strategy. So I knew this would generate a lot of conversation, because this is your wheelhouse, and this is a teacher's wheelhouse. And but you, especially being one-to-one, paraprofessionals, being classroom support, you're doing this every day. So great feedback. Anyone else? Okay. So when we think about universal design, or UDL, we have to think about how we're presenting the product, right? How we're presenting the activities, the lessons, and ensure that those are done in a way that all students can have access to that. And that might be through the size of the text. If they have, there may be kids with vision issues. It could be images, graphs, even this one kind of makes me chuckle. Contrast between background and text or image. I have visual issues, right? Beyond kind of the normal, I just need glasses. And so for me, if it's a really busy background, I get so distracted and I have a hard time focusing on what I'm supposed to be focusing on. It's taken me a hot second to learn Zoom, right? Because there's just so many buttons and so many things visually. But I'm able to keep things pretty simple in the background so that I can concentrate on the text and image in front of me. So that's that one stuck out. So as we look through this list, you can probably identify what type of learner, you probably already know what type of learner you are. And when you think about information that's presented to you, you know your comfort, right? You know what you would like to see or how your brain inputs it. So that's kind of what, when we think about displaying work to the students, are some of the things we think about. Even the rate of speed or sound. So, I've had students in the past that the teacher maybe has a pretty high-pitched voice, and that pitch alone would irritate that student. And sometimes it took a while to figure that out. But again, recognizing as the adults, the way our voices, the way our speech is our tone too high? Is it screechy? And really watch those cues with the kiddos, or they'll just tell you, right? They'll let you know if they're getting frustrated. Any input on this as far as just the visual display of work that you've noticed that has struck you, oddly or wonderfully? Any input on this one? It's pretty self-explanatory, but I always like to hear out what's going on in the classrooms. All right. Next is thinking about auditory information. And when we think about this, you probably heard the term sit and get. So I know when I was going through school, it was all about the lecture and doing the work. And to me, that was not my best way of learning. I needed to be more hands-on. But when we're thinking of a classroom, what are ways to present information, auditory, in different ways? We can do closed captioning, again, charts, notation of music or sound. This one I think is used a lot, and if not, it should be used more than it is providing a written transcript of the video. So let's say they're watching a video in the class, and we provide a transcript to that. And Holly is like the queen bee when it comes to the scripts, right, of a video or a training. And Holly just has this down in her wheelhouse. And I think, different learners appreciate that. So sign language, if the student can't hear the spoken language, what's their do they sign? So again, just thinking about what accesses do the students have auditory, in the classroom. Always providing a visual is huge, too. Visuals across the board and every avenue is a win-win. So what is, does any of you, have you witnessed something that goes on that a teacher does in your classroom that addresses auditory needs? Maybe outside of the sign language, anything different or unique that you're willing to share? Holly, I think I'm boring them to tears. Such a quiet group. They're like, oh, anything in our chat?
Nope.
Nope. All right. Well, we're going to keep chugging along.
They're probably just ready for spring break like the rest of us, right?
I know the sun was out when I came in. The sun was out, but it doesn't look like now. And this is talking about the visual, how visual information is presented in the classroom. Again, providing descriptions for all images. So just don't assume, right, that let's say an image is presented to a student, that the student's going to understand that image, and maybe they would understand it if that image also had a description, or the teacher provided a description of that image. You think about kids that are colorblind, right? And we present an image of a stop sign. Let's say it's preschool, right? We're teaching them stop, go, but they're colorblind and they can't see green or red. So how do you teach that child what that stop sign looks like and what that, go sign looks like? So again, just thinking of the different needs of the classroom. Allowing students to touch things as a reference, or, you have a visual of something, let's say of a bunny, right? We're teaching them a picture of a bunny, and the teacher then says, but the bunny feels like this, its fur feels like this. And maybe the tactile piece of that is you actually have something the child can touch. Having physical objects and, things like this is, again, preschool has it down, kindergarten, first grade, they have this down to a science. It gets more challenging as the kids get older, right? And still providing those opportunities for access to all. And it's also okay with visual if you are looking at a text to allow that student to work with a partner, or have that partner read out loud to the student, or in a small group, or even that text-to-speech softwares that so many of technology is free and it's accessible to districts. So any questions or input on this one? No? So the little video talked about multimedia options, right? And so unless it's crucial to the skill that we're teaching, you can use, so let's say we're teaching a kid how to write in calligraphy. That's very specific, right? So you can only use certain multimedias for that skill. But if it's just not pertaining to the skill and we want to offer multiple media, that's okay to do. So that could look like media such as text-to-speech, drawing, illustrations, comics, storyboards. I love it when I see a teacher giving a student options. Maybe it's on a rubric, right, of making the final product. And it might be a comic strip. It might be a picture over the written language. It could be creating something to music. So again, allowing them to choose how to compose the product. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Again, using, manipulatives like blocks and 3D models. I think in that video it showed like a chemistry or biology lab, and they're holding something in their hand of the molecules and the atoms. And so again, allowing an option for kids to physically touch is also great. And also, our kids are whizzes on the computer, right? And if they can create things from the web that's appropriate, and maybe that takes the barrier away from them and they can use that technology, let them do that. Again, just offering options. Has anybody witnessed anything really neat in this area when seeing a class activity happening that the teacher has allowed a student to do? Does anybody have a neat activity that was used and they use different media options. No? Okay. Yeah, Holly, I think I may be boring them.
Mm-mm.
It's probably, you probably already know all of this, but again, I just like to, you probably know this, but didn't know that it kind of fell under that umbrella of universal design for learning. And so, again, just kind of hitting on those multiple tools, spell checkers, grammar checkers, text-to-speech software, calculators. I don't know if any of you have seen talking calculators. That's really cool. They also have calculators for kids that are orthopedically impaired, right? And so it's a modified calculator where maybe they have limited mobility of their arms, and they can use this type of calculator. So again, just different options that you can use, web applications. Kids they love doing animations, presentations, and making it kind of their own work. And that falls under that action and expression category under UDL. The ultimate goal, right, for universal design for learning, and we'll talk a little bit more about this next week when we're talking about differentiation, talking about scaffolding, but our ultimate goal is for learners to be as independent as possible. And at times, if we need to scale back some of the options and still give that student independence. So that's kind of what this is talking about, is building that the independence and giving the student different degrees of freedom available to them to really show their knowledge of the content. We're making kind of leveling the playing field and giving our students options to sometimes a very tough curriculum for them. But if we give them different options, a lot more of their knowledge comes out because we've removed the hurdle. And so keeping that in mind and giving that feedback. But again, the ultimate goal for any classroom is independence, success, and building that confidence in the curriculum. And of course, always providing different ways of feedback. So they produce this beautiful presentation, and maybe a student, you do the rubric and you give them a score, or the teacher does, but then giving them some other kind of feedback. I'm a big proponent of student conferencing, right? Even from a little, kindergartner all the way to high school, just having that moment of check-in with a student during class to just see how you doing. And this would be a good time then to give them feedback on any graded work that was given. So yeah. Any questions or comments on this one? So like I said, we were going to go into scaffolding, but we will start that next week or the next session. And so, but we'll dive in a little deeper into what this looks like and differentiation within the classroom and things that you'll be asked to do or already are asked to do. Holly, I think I'll turn it back to you.
All right.
I'm going to stop sharing, maybe. And then let me go up and make you host.
Bear with me. Am I good?
Having issues. I know you're shocked.
Yeah.
All right, there you go. You're good.
Let's see. Okay, so as I said earlier, if you guys back out of here, It's this way. This is the evaluation link for today. Drop that in the chat. And then if you are able and can go back to the survey that we hit you with first thing, that'll be real useful information moving forward.